Welcome to the 16th episode of the MMA Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. This week, we got a lot to bring you. As always, we have UFC on FX5, last weekend's card. Next weekend's card, we're going to break down for you UFC 153. Got the greatest fighter of all time, who's going to be on that one, Anderson Silva. Bunch of news. We got 2 weeks worth, because last week's episode kind of shat the bed. Strikeforce folding, obviously the biggest news of that. Mayhem having a complete breakdown on the air. A couple fight announcements. Dana White being Dana White. So before we get into it, let's let Smoke Serpent play us out. And a big thanks to Smoke Serpent for giving us that intro song to use. Big shout out to our listeners. Actually, shout out to Nate Corey as well, who we were planning on having on last week. Things fell through with Blog Talk Radio. You'll notice that we aren't using Blog Talk Radio anymore. It was the 4th or 5th time they gave us an issue. So we were done running back to them. Took a little bit of technical savvy, but we're streaming on Ustream now. Much better situation. The audio quality is a lot better. We don't have a fixed time. We don't have to start at 8 o'clock sharp every single night. You know, if something happens, we can start at 8:02, which is good for us, not necessarily the listeners. And before we get into the bulk of the podcast, it seems like every week we give MMA Mental a shout out, and tell you to listen to their podcast and say Ray and Patrick are awesome and move on real quick. But I'm gonna linger for a second this week. Ray and Patrick over at MMA Mental do a really fantastic job, and if you aren't listening to their podcast, you've really
fuck your mother.
Go fuck your mother, cocksucker. You're really missing something good.
Absolutely,
you have anything to add to that? Yeah.
Oh, I got tons. Admittedly, I didn't listen to them, even after our first couple podcasts. Jake would be shouting these guys out, like, okay, well, I don't see the relevance of that, whatever. But after getting in contact with the guys and going and listening to their archives, they really, really, really do a fantastic job. Their Steven Quadros episode really, comes to mind because, beyond a very awkward first 2 minutes, back and forth.
Hi, Steven. Steven, you alright?
Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. Are you alright?
Yeah, I'm great. Hey, this is Patrick. Just a pleasure to have you on, Steven. How are you doing today? I'm doing good. And yourself?
I'm good.
But, beyond that, the interview was absolutely fantastic. There's things that I didn't even know about Sakuraba, smoking cigarettes, as well as fighters actually training to do those soccer kicks and flying stomps. I guess that was actually a skill where they used someone laying on their back, holding pads in front of their faces, which is, something I've been following the sport for a while. I had no idea. So they're uncovering new awesome things. And hell, even their roundtable with Josh from MMA at Work was fantastic, because it was nice to have a nice differing points of view. Even if Josh's voice to me sounds like 30 cats being raped while scratching their nails on chalkboard,
being slowly dragged through a meat grinder. MMA Mental is a much more interview centric show, and they actually have 2 or 3 fighters on, it seems like, every single week. This week they've got Lockdown MMA, the people who run that fight promotion, along with Jess. I don't know how the fuck you pronounce this guy's last name. Leodon. Jess Leodon. And Joey Beltran, the Mexicutioner. They had him on today as well, so check them out. MMAmental.com, simple. TheMMAPodcast.com, just as simple, but I guess if you're listening, then you already know, son.
And then you already know.
So yeah, definitely check them out. Ray and Patrick are at the top of their game, and we actually
I love those guys. I love them.
I love them. I would say I love them like brothers, but it's more like a lover sort of thing.
Or maybe like a crazy redheaded stepsister
that you fuck.
Whoa.
Yeah, and we actually do a roundtable with Ray and Patrick every Monday. It's on our iTunes feed. I'll also put up links for that on the MMApodcast.com if you want to check that out. We just finished our third roundtable last week, doing a fourth one this coming Monday. We do it every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and we usually break down fights. It's gotten a little more raunchy in the last couple episodes, which, at least for our listeners, is a good thing.
And we absolutely love raunch. It's a part of our identity. We're not really politically correct. We like to say what's on our minds, and even if it is about cats being raped or poop, we just want you guys to know that we're doing it for you. I mean, who wants a really dry, boring podcast? Nobody.
I kind of do like a dry, boring podcast every now and again, but for
like
the most
your cereal,
part,
no milk.
Like my cereal, I take all the marshmallows out of my Lucky Charms and just pour the horrible, weedy bits down my butt. So yeah, listen to the MMA Roundtable every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Listen to us every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on Ustream now. You can get us, I think it's like ustream.tv/channel/the MMA Podcast. It's up on our website. I'm done giving you times and bullshit. If you actually want to join in on the podcast, we have a new number. You can call in. The new number is 213-457-3380. Our last number was hosted by Blog Talk Radio, but as we're not with them anymore, I got my own new fancy LA area code number on Skype, son. Or if you don't feel like calling in and chatting for a long time, you just want to tweet a single thought, that's fine too. Tweet us at the MMA Podcast. I have our mentions up, so whenever someone shouts us out, I'll mention whatever they said, and like I've said a million fucking times during this rant, you can visit our website, themmapodcast.com.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Go check it out, you guys. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
And everyone who tried to tune in last week, our listeners, Corey actually was going to come on again this week. He's with his family, but I was like, I really don't want to take any time out of your family time. Such a nice dude. We have a lot of questions for him. Hopefully have him on soon. Have Michael Chiavello on, the Voice Versus. Have Henzo Gracie on. And the guest that, at least personally, Chris and I can't wait for. Number 1 on iTunes, one of the most recognized comedians in the world, Joey Mad Flavor Coco Diaz cocksucker.
I would lose my fucking shit if that guy came on our podcast, dude. I would be biting my nails and, just sweating bullets like 30 minutes out, for sure.
Yeah, especially, both of us are Rogan Podcast fans, big Rogan Podcast fans. When we had Eddie Bravo, I was pretty surprised we were able to keep it together, especially keeping in mind it was only our 6th or 7th podcast. Joey Diaz is such a wild motherfucker. I could not wait for that. I've actually DM'd him back and forth a few times on Twitter. A couple weeks ago, he said he was doing the Ice House Chronicles podcast. Last week, he was doing a commercial in Oregon or something. And this week, I was tempted to DM him, but just because it's our first time doing the MMA podcast on Ustream, I wanted to make sure we had a flawless run through, make sure we had everything down before we let anyone down like we did Corey last week, which was officially the lost episode.
I think you're saying Corey. I'm like, Corey who? Who the hell is Corey?
Your friend Corey, man.
We're talking about Nate the Rock Quarry. You
Warder.
In their quarry.
Warder Coral. That's all I have to say.
Alright, so thanks guys, and we gone.
Thank you for tuning in. It's been 2 hours. We gone. No, shit, it's 5 minutes, or shit, it's 10 minutes, and we haven't even mentioned a lick of MMA, which I'm sure the MMA fans listening to this love. Yeah, let's get straight into UFC on FX5. We went through it on the MMA Roundtable. A couple of notes. Dennis Hallman cut, unfortunately, after not being able to make the weight cut. going through what sounds like a brutal custody battle with his ex-wife, who he's claiming to be a drug addict. So really hope the best for really historically one of the stalwarts of the UFC. Trains a lot of guys. We had John Albert on. He's trained by Dennis Hallman. So hopefully we'll see Hallman back in the UFC, not wearing the Dennis Ballman shorts, obviously, but really a stalwart in the MMA. He's proved his worth his entire career, and I wish the best for him. Shane Roller, meh.
Yeah, don't really care about that guy. I mean, in the WEC, he looked impressive against a couple guys. He choked out Anthony Njokuani, choked out Jamie Varner at WEC 53 by rear naked choke in the early second or late first. So, I mean, he's had his moments. He knocked out Thiago Tavares in his Octagon debut, but let's be real, hasn't exactly looked amazing in the UFC. And the last thing we need at welterweight or lightweight is a boxer wrestler, for the love of God.
Very, very much so. Oh, and thank you for the retweets, P Money and Buffalo Dave. If either of you guys want to throw in your 2 cents, definitely feel free to call in or tweet us. That number again is 213-457-3380, 213-457-3380, or tweet us at the MMA Podcast. And we love interacting with our listeners. So yeah, let's get straight to the cut of our Tove in UFC on FX5. The Jeremy Stephens bout canceled, unfortunately. He was brought in on assault charges. They apparently tooled Dana White around a little bit and wouldn't let him out on bail. Kind of an ugly situation. The fight actually got canceled because he was in jail the day of the fight. Yves Edwards was standing backstage, had his hands wrapped and everything, and about half hour before his fight was told that it's not going to go down. So, man, it's kind of ugly when something like that happens. It kind of makes you feel like a police department is against a fighter personally for absolutely zero reason. Patrick on the MMA Roundtable made a really astute comparison, comparing Jeremy Stephens to Floyd Mayweather, who gets to pick his court dates, pick his jail times, schedule it around fights. Jeremy Stephens, everyone knew Jeremy Stephens was going to be in Minneapolis for the weigh-ins the day before. There's obviously police at the weigh-ins to deal with crowd control there. Do they do anything then? Nope. But they arrest him day of. That's so whack. And luckily, I believe I saw Yves Edwards was matched up against John Cholish recently, so that'll be good for him to get a fight in. I'm sure he's in fight shape, and he was also a big loser in this. And yeah, Jeremy Stephens, luckily it sounded like Dana White was more on Stephens' side than the police department, so I don't expect to see him get cut soon.
How ridiculous is it that if you have enough money, the rich don't even go broke or deal with stuff like we do. They get to keep their houses, they like you said, pick court dates. It's absolutely astounding. And a really obvious thing that people should be talking about more is the fact that Floyd can do whatever he wants, and like the rest of us, Jeremy has to suffer the consequences, for something that who knows, what he did. We don't really have any inside information, but it's just goddamn sad, dude.
And I'm going to try to avoid going on a rant here, but at least for the uneducated, if I told you that the system's a sham and it's built to screw people who make less money, you'd probably roll your eyes and be like, yeah, you're another conspiracy theorist, huh? No. I mean, jails are run privately. That's all you need to know. There is a business in bringing people to jail. If you have money, you can beat it. If you don't have money, you can't beat it. It's that simple. I think my lucky stars. I was born. My immediate parents aren't necessarily multi-millionaires, but my uncle's a lawyer, my grandpa's a lawyer. So at least I know if I decide to go mayhem and burn down a church, I could probably at least have a fighting chance. But the system really is set up to fuck people.
It really is. We both talked about it before. Personally, we both have family members that have been involved in, this system, and having been there personally and been through, some really challenging times that have basically, been really just horrible on my family. It goes it goes a long way to say that it's completely corrupt, and hopefully they can work on that. But that's neither here nor there.
That's neither here nor there. We're talking about MMA. 15 minutes in, we still haven't gone over a single fucking fight. People listening, which I'm assuming no one's listening anymore, but if you are listening, thank you for putting up with our bullshit. Let's start off with fight of the night. Featherweight fight between Diego Nunes and Bart Palashevsky. I actually scored it 30-26 for Diego the Gun Nunes. Gave him the first round 10-8, the second two 10-9. He really went out there. It looked a little bit I don't know if lackluster is the right word, but he wasn't coming out like his nickname, the Gun, like you said on the Roundtable podcast. And I had a feeling this fight was going to deliver, and it fucking delivered, man.
Delivered in droves. That was a barn burner, man. I mean, Bart Palashevsky, you attach his name to a fight, and you're probably going to have just you're going to have a fantastic scrap. And, he basically showed on Fight Night that even at featherweight, Bart Palashevsky still has that killer instinct. He's got size, and then you have Diego Nunes. We're beating a dead horse, but hasn't really delivered in the past. He does a lot of cool stuff like spinning wheel kicks and spinning back kicks and spinning back fists. He's like a Tasmanian devil in there, but has never seemed to really come out with the intention to finish. He just wants to win, which you can't hate on him. It's a sport. But as a fan, that gets really frustrating. He came out there. He was winging overhand rights, which I'd never seen from him, and I think that's why he caught Bart Palashevsky, by surprise. Bart wasn't really expecting that, so it was a one-sided beatdown for most of that fight. I mean, Palashevsky was coming back, did rock Nunes, but ultimately it was all Nunes, and fantastic choice for fight of the night. It definitely deserved it.
Yeah, and I actually mentioned going in that his 11 fights before coming over to Zuffa and fighting in the WEC and UFC, he was 11-0, finished every single fight, and the streak has gone on. He's now fought 5 times in Zuffa, 5 for the WEC, 5 for the UFC. Every fight has gone to a decision, but this one was one where if Bart Palashevsky didn't have an iron chin, he would have stopped him.
Yeah, definitely would have stopped him. I agree. Palashevsky is one of those guys that just keeps on trucking no matter what you throw at him. So it was just a fantastic fight. It was a pleasure to watch it.
Yeah, that was fight of the night in my book as well. I'm glad both guys walked away with $40,000. We had a welterweight scrap as well. All right, I guess I'll go over the other fights before we get into the top 6. We had Darren. How the fuck do you say his last name? Ayoyanama defeating Phil Harris by submission, rear naked choke in the second round, 3:38. We had Jacob Volkman, who's been in the spotlight for heavily criticizing President Obama during his post-fight press conferences. Luckily, he didn't say anything too stupid this time. He defeats Shane Roller by rear naked choke 2 minutes and 38 seconds into the opening round. And Marcus Leverson defeated Carlo Prater by split decision, 29-28.
In a horrible fight. Horrible.
Yeah. Horrible fight. Yeah, I hate split decisions. I hate grapple fucks. I hated everything about this fight.
That fight was, it was like having pieces of glass just shoved into your eyeballs and then, just twisted and turned. Yeah, it was not good. I mean, you got a guy in Carlo Prater who got destroyed by Eric Silva and won a controversial no contest, I mean, that's not really winning, but he got absolutely destroyed, hit with legal shots at, I believe it was UFC 142, and the ref, Mario Yamasaki, cocksucker. Mario Yamasaki stepped in, thought they were illegal, they weren't, and so you'd think he would have a lot to prove at welterweight, I do have the skills to hang, and I'm finally in the UFC, and that fight gives neither of them any stock. That was an absolute snoozer.
Yeah, it really was. You were talking about shoving glass in your eyes. I wanted to give myself a glassectomy. Going back to Jacob Volkman, after that fight. So we'll swiftly move on to Mike Pierce versus Aaron Simpson. And I'll admit, I was wrong as hell. I was telling everybody I knew who knows MMA, God, this is going to be the most boring fight ever. Mike Pierce and Aaron Simpson, both guys known for their wrestling acumen, both known for going to decisions over and over and over and over and over. I think Pierce had four straight decisions before this fight. Aaron Simpson had 6 straight decisions before this fight, and I was like, I wonder what's going to happen. Mike Pierce knocked Aaron Simpson the fuck out 29 seconds into the second round. It was interesting to me in the fact that I thought Simpson came away with the first, and Mike Pierce came out in the second round like he had something to prove, and whatever he had to prove, he proved it.
Well, yeah, and you're kind of short-selling that first round because not only did Aaron Simpson dominate, he rocked Mike Pierce, which you've never really seen in a fight. Josh Koscheck couldn't really do it. Hendricks didn't really do it. Fitch didn't do it. So all these top-level guys against Pierce haven't really done anything similar. Then you have Aaron Simpson, kind of a B-level middleweight who came down and had a boring fight against Kenny Robertson, his welterweight debut, and then comes out there, rocks Mike Pierce, hits him with a ton of knees from the tie clinch, got him up against the cage, total domination, and totally unexpected for me because I'm a huge Mike Pierce fan. I think that he has the skills to be top 5, but just hasn't really found his mark yet. So he went out there and hit Aaron Simpson on Simpson's way in. Simpson was ducking down for his own punch or maybe a takedown, and like you hear, you can't run into a punch. That's just going to make it even worse. And night-night, Aaron Simpson. Where do you see Mike Pierce going from here? He's got 2 straight wins. The first fight was against Carlos Eduardo Hoca and was one of the worst fights of the year. And then you have this fight against Aaron Simpson where he just finishes somebody finally. He's the only guy to ever batter John Fitch as bad as GSP did. And he's also gone to very close decisions against Koscheck and Hendricks. So, it's really kind of hard at this point to gauge where he's at because he's fought some of the cream of the crop. Who do you think he should take on?
That's a really good question, and I love your breakdown of that too. Simpson, he really owned that first round. He rocked him. He was going for a rear naked choke at the end of the first round. For Pierce, obviously the UFC likes to match guys who have just come off a win against other guys who have a win. So someone who I would like to see him face off against is James Head, who just beat Brian Ebersol, a guy with really top wrestling skills like Mike Pierce has. And I think Pierce Head, that would be a great fight to maybe the winners now in the top 10 of the UFC welterweights, which is not an easy task to attain.
You're high on James Head, dude. You're really high on that guy. You bring him up, for I think 3 different matchups now. What is it about James Head that you see as super impressive or would warrant him to get these shots at these guys?
I think he has the skills to take on any kind of fighter. He went out there, he beat Papi Abedi, who's known as a guy who swings for the fences, knocks people's heads off. He gave him a rear naked choke in the first round in Sweden in front of all of Papi Abedi's fans. That was not an easy thing to pull off. And then he faces a guy in Brian Ebersol who's known for grinding out decision victories. He was on a crazy streak before fighting James Head. Beat Dennis Hallman, Claude Patrick, Chris Lytle. Not very easy to beat Chris Lytle, TJ Waldberger, and he went up against James Head and just couldn't get it done against him. A lot of split decisions I don't agree with. I agreed with that decision. I thought Head owned the fight. And I'm really kind of interested because he did lose to Nick Ring back at UFC. Yep, back at UFC 131. But I think kind of like the winner of our next fight, Michael Johnson, is a guy who is really, really evolving as time goes on.
Yeah, that's definitely a good take. I don't really see anything in James Head that screams potential top 10. I think that he's very, very large for the weight class, but as we've seen, that doesn't really necessarily mean an advantage because, some people lose their speed or agility. So I think give James Head a stiff, test in his next fight. And
give him a stiff head.
Yeah, a nice stiff head.
A nice stiff head. Actually, I just checked it out. James Head is going to be fighting Mike Pyle this December at the Tough 16 finale.
Wow.
So fuck that prediction.
That is a
very stiff head. Maybe the winner of a fight that's going to be in just a few days, John Fitch versus Eric Silva. Pierce does have a loss to John Fitch on his record. Pierce is one of these guys who's only lost to the cream of the crop.
Thank God you went tip. I was wondering if you would.
The cream of the head, so to speak, of the welterweight division. John Fitch, Johnny Hendricks, Josh Koscheck. Those are three. Those are pretty much the who's who of at least former welterweight contenders. You have a lot of new guys in the mix now, like Condit, Campman, Marquardt,
McDonald.
Yep. A fight against the winner of Fitch versus Silva might be a good one because either one's pretty compelling. If Silva gets past Fitch, Pierce, I think, is a guy who's a little bit more well-rounded than the John Fitch is. Obviously proved last weekend that he can go out there and knock a guy out, which Fitch is not really known for. And if he fights John Fitch, obviously the storyline would be redemption.
Absolutely, but we all know that Eric Silva is going to win that fight. So Silva versus Pierce would be an awesome test because you would have Eric Silva finally tested against three top wrestlers. You have Brenneman, Fitch, and Pierce. If he gets by all those guys, he needs a top 5 after that.
I think it'd be pretty hilarious if John Fitch just grapple fucked Eric Silva for 15 minutes with boot. I wouldn't enjoy watching it, but I would enjoy watching the crowd's reaction, just going fucking bananas, like Fagano, obrigado. Yeah, that would be pretty funny to see.
I hope we have no Brazilians on our podcast.
Yeah, because I just kind of screamed a horrible curse word 5 times in Portuguese. But if you speak Portuguese, then unless you're bilingual, you're probably not listening.
Or bisexual.
Or if you're bisexual. We actually have a pretty large bisexual demographic.
Don't lie to our listeners.
2 out of 3 people who listen to this are bisexual. So if you're listening to this, you might just be a bisexual. Just saying. We're huge in the tranny, in the LGPRT community. I don't know. There's some gay synonym. Moving swiftly on, actually, I didn't ask who do you think would make sense for Aaron Simpson next?
I don't know, maybe a Buffalo Wild Wings toilet.
I think he would be prime. He's 38. He just needs to go to the local BWW, scarf down 20 wings, and
shit it out.
Shit it out. It's the best way to get over a loss. Maybe God, it's
devolving into madness. We need to
get on track here. It is a slow devolvement. See, now that we're on Ustream, you can tell we give even less of a fuck, which was hard to imagine. But hey, that is how we do it.
We're having fun, aren't we? And we have very poignant MMA observations, as well as a Monday roundtable where we are serious. So this is kind of our outlet to really, get dirty.
Get nice and dirty. What do you think about Aaron Simpson versus Claude Patrick?
Well, let's just say that I would feel that fight to me would be what you thought Pierce Simpson would be. So I'll just leave it on that.
I don't know what that means, but let's move on.
Well, you said that Pierce versus Simpson would be super fucking boring. They've been decisions a lot. Yeah, I feel that Claude Patrick is obviously a very gifted fighter, but definitely boring. So I don't think that would be good at all.
Super fucking boring. We had a lightweight fight as well, Michael Johnson versus Danny Castillo. That was the knockout of the night. Myself, and I think you also agree that Pierce should have gotten knockout of the night. But I think Johnson may have just gotten KO of the night, because even though Simpson dominated Pierce in the first round, Danny Castillo absolutely dominated Michael Johnson in the first round. I actually gave it a 10-8. Michael Johnson looked like there was no way he was going to pull off a victory, and somehow, sort of like Mike Pierce did, went out there. Pierce did it in 29 seconds. Michael Johnson did it in a minute 6. Goes out there, gets a straight KO victory, earns $40,000 for his efforts.
Yeah, it was a crazy paradigm shift for both of these fights, and rounds 1 and 2 were very diametrically opposed, considering that both guys got dominated, Pierce and Johnson respectively, and then came back to knock out their opponents, Simpson and Castillo. So it was strange that both contenders for knockout of the night actually played out the same exact way. I think that's kind of eerie.
For sure, yeah, it was really kind of interesting seeing that Fuel TV card end in such a similar fashion. You rarely see a guy just get handled in the first round. Usually that'll do more to demotivate a fighter than it does to motivate him, charge him up, and go out there in the second round. Both of these guys got dominated and roared out there. I mean, Castillo was basically just held Michael Johnson down and did whatever he wanted. Passed guard, worked a half guard, worked a side control, hopped into mount. I mean, he was doing whatever he wanted to. But Danny last call, Castillo didn't get the last word, and Michael Johnson just lands a hard left and a right. I believe it was a short left that sent him to the ground and sent Josh Rosenthal in there to in the fight 66 seconds in.
Absolutely fantastic fight. I've never really put too much stock into Michael Johnson. I felt that he had some really awesome skills, but he got completely dominated by Paul Sass. And I've seen him kind of break in fights before, and Danny Castillo has gone on some very impressive runs. I mean, I think in the WEC he had like a 4-fight win streak. Then in the UFC he had like a 3-fight win streak. But Castillo has proven time and time again.
Local advertising is changing.
Paired up against
with
really
the old
top shelf guys like Anthony Pettis or Jacob Volkman or any of those guys, that he just doesn't really have what it takes to get over that opposition. So moving on beyond their faults, this was a fantastic fight. Just a lot of fun. I had no idea what was going to happen. It felt like a Breaking Bad episode. I was just on my feet the entire time. So Castillo really has to do some soul searching, and I think that Johnson is probably going to get a decent, like, high B-level fighter for his next fight.
I don't know what it is, but that tough 12 finale between Johnson and Brookins, I really didn't put that much into either fighter. I didn't think that Brookins or Michael Johnson were gonna turn out to be big time UFC standouts, but Brookins, I mean, he has a very bright future at featherweight. His only losses coming to Eric Koch and Charles Oliveira, who are at the top of the featherweight division. And Michael Johnson just looking like he's one of these guys, like Ray put it on the round table, that he's really starting to evolve as a fighter. As far as his next opponent, I was saying on the round table, a lot of lightweight guys. The lightweight and welterweight divisions in the UFC, I think, are pretty inarguably the most stacked. Maybe a fight against Matt Wyman next?
I don't think that Michael Johnson deserves that fight. I think that Matt Wyman, by dominating Paul Sass like that, gives him a much higher level opponent than Michael Johnson. Do I think Michael Johnson versus Matt Wyman would be a good fight? Absolutely. I just don't feel that they're on similar trajectories if you look at their last 5 or 6 fights.
What about Jacob Volkman came off with a win against Shane Roller in the prelims of the same card?
That's perfect. That's much more in line. I think so.
Yeah, so Joe Silva, you listened to us when we said Dodson de Silva should be the flyweight title elimination fight. Listen to us now. that Volkman and Johnson make that fight.
Yeah, Joe. Stop playing around and get real.
Yeah, and Joe, what the fuck was that UFC 153 main event about, which we'll get to shortly, but Jesus Christ, man, come on, get your shit together.
Yeah, seriously, I mean, here we are podcasting and just talking about poop and, cats and getting raped. Come on, get real.
But yeah, moving on to the main card, the FX card, we had 4 fights on that. Justin Edwards versus Josh Neer. I think it was originally supposed to be 5 fights, but that Jeremy Stevens-Eve Edwards fight was scrapped due to Stevens being locked up. Justin Edwards defeats Josh Neer. Neer's pretty technical on the ground. I really wasn't expecting to see Justin Edwards come away with a submission victory. Neer trains with the Diaz brothers, one of the few people to have fought both Diaz brothers. His friends with him. I saw either Nate or Nick shout him out before the fight. Coming off two finishes, though, 2 first-round finishes. Mike Pyle knocked him out in the first round pretty recently, actually, this past June. And coming off this technical submission, which technical submissions, even though a lot of them can be pretty gnarly, especially arm bars and leg locks, they're one of the most visceral ways a fight can end, because it's a submission, and instead of tapping out, the referee actually has to run in there and stop it. Justin Edwards choked Josh Neer to sleep.
I definitely didn't see this happening. Justin Edwards is, very creative in there. I wasn't really too high on him. I saw him, almost knock out John McGuire, and he had another fight against some dude. I can't remember his name, but nothing about Justin Edwards screamed, "Oh, I'm going to finish Josh Neer," a guy who has fought some of the best. I mean, Josh Neer at this point in his career might just want to look in the rear. I mean, there's really no reason for this guy to keep on fighting. This is his third
That's a personal
stint.
decision. If he wants to look in the rear, that's not you or I to tell him that he needs to start looking in the rear.
That's true, but hear me out. This
Son
is
of a bitch.
His third stint in the UFC. He lost to Nick Diaz by submission. He's lost to a lot of guys in there, and he's beat a decent caliber plethora of fighters. Like he beat Joe Daddy Stevenson. He beat Mac Danzig. But if you look at who he's beat and who he's lost to in his 3 stints in the UFC, he really just can't hang at the top, much like Danny Castillo. It's another weird parallel there. So I would have to say that Josh Neer gets one more fight, considering he's 2-1? I think he's 2-1 in his latest stint. So he's definitely going to get one more. If he gets finished in his next fight and it's not a barn burner, I see him getting cut.
Yeah, I totally agree there. I don't want to take away from Justin Edwards, because that was a really, really great finish. Pulled guard, locked in that high guillotine, hanging off him till he fell to the ground and was stopped. But he lost to John McGuire about a year back, and John McGuire looked absolutely pathetic against John Hathaway at UFC on Fuel 5. I don't know necessarily if I would put Edwards up against that skilled welterweight yet. Maybe Seth Basinski, who just came off a win against Simeon Thorson.
I don't think he's earned that yet. I mean, okay. Let's see.
It isn't like Seth is necessarily GSP here.
Well, I know that, but Seth actually has a decent track record at welterweight. You look at Justin Edwards, and he's won, lost, and now won in his UFC career. Basinski, if I'm not mistaken, is 3-1 in his last 4, I believe.
He's actually won his last 5 fights.
Oh, okay, even better. There you go. There's my point. He also finished Matt Brown, and Matt Brown right now is on a 4-fight win streak and is scheduled to face Mike Swick in December at UFC on Fox. Was it 5? I believe. So I think that Basinski is way ahead of Edwards in the pecking order. Let's look at guys on similar career paths. Dong Yeon Kim, maybe.
Dong Yeon Kim.
Yeah, that's about it. I mean, Dong Young Kim lost to Condit, beat Sean Pearson, and then lost to Maya, but that was due to injury. So
maybe, and it appears we're back finally. Sorry about that. Chicago Internet, always bringing you the best. I'm going to have somebody come out and check this out because this is getting a little ridiculous that it happens once a show that this Internet just decides to boot me off. But like I was saying, enough about Justin Edwards and Josh Neer. You want to move on to Dodson De Silva?
Sure.
Sure, you might want to turn up your mic a little bit. I don't think I turned you down.
Sure.
But, yeah, so we had John Silva taking on Jussier Dodson. No, we had John Dodson versus Jussier De Silva in what I thought should have been at least a co-main. What do you think about that?
I mean, as far as title implications go, sure, but John Dodson isn't exactly a big star, and Jake Ellenberger and Huron aren't exactly either, so, I mean, I guess you could mix and match. It would make more sense to put a title eliminator as a co-main, but let's get real here. A lot of people out there don't like the smaller guys fighting. They feel that, there's no finishes and they're just sparring, as well as the fact that it wasn't really made known that this would be a title eliminator until well after they booked the match, so I got no problems with it.
Yeah, it should have been Ellenberger Koscheck originally. My only beef with it is that this fight meant a lot more to the flyweight division than Ellenberger Huron meant to welterweights. Even Ellenberger Koscheck would have made to welterweights because it's not a title eliminator. Obviously, Silva Brown, they're just fighting to stay in the top 10. I actually thought Jussier De Silva was going to win. He about a year or two ago was the unanimous number one at flyweight. Everyone thought he was the best in the world. Dodson was kind of an unknown until he came on The Ultimate Fighter. But Dodson really impressed out there. Landed a flurry of punches and got a TKO victory late in the second round.
Yeah, the first round was kind of very measured, going back and forth. You could see John Dodson looking for that big shot, and De Silva obviously was, not wanting to have any of the stand-up. And they were talking about how he bulked up. I personally had only seen him fight once against Ian McCall for the Tachi Palace title a long time ago. But what I noticed was that in that second round, Dodson just turned it on, man, which is great. It's nice to have a flyweight finish, considering the fact that a lot of people out there are saying that flyweights are going to have a very consistently less finishing rate than other weight classes. So it was awesome to see that. It was awesome to see Dodson jump off the cage and do a backflip. And as well as check on his opponent afterwards. He hugged him and congratulated De Silva's camp, which was nice, which was Andre Pederneiras, who trains Nunes and Aldo and all those guys. So overall, it was nice to have a real, just clear-cut contender for Demetrius Johnson. Because if that fight had been, 3 rounds of nothing, then obviously no one's going to be excited about that. So to have a finishing move like that was just nice to have.
Yeah, and he gives Jussier De Silva the second loss of his career. His first loss came against Ian McCall, who's also a top UFC flyweight. And for Dodson, obviously next step is Mighty Mouse. What do you think about his chances fighting for the title?
Oh, I think he has amazing chances. Just absolutely fantastic. For a guy that bloated up to bantamweight and was facing really just larger guys, he did very well. He won the season. He knocked out what's his face? That stupid fucking alpha male guy with blonde hair. I can't remember his name. Dillashaw, yeah. TJ Dillashaw. He knocked his ass out. That was nice to see. But now he's at his natural weight class. He looks just as active. He looks pretty big for the weight class as far as musculature goes. So
he looks super torqued.
Yeah, super torqued, super toned, super jacked, cock diesel
super
ripped.
Tove.
Yeah. So
cock diesel.
He looked absolutely fantastic in there, and I give him shit. You know what? The only people that DJ loses to are Brad Pickett and Dominic Cruz. And I would have to say, if you mix those two styles, you get John Dodson. If you think about it,
Dodson. Yeah, that's a point I actually hadn't thought about before. Personally, I'm still picking Demetrius Johnson in that fight. I think Johnson has much more experience. Dodson, I do think, will eventually be a flyweight champion. He's much younger than the rest of the guys toward the top there. I think he's a lot younger than Benavidez, younger than Ian McCall, younger than Jussier da Silva, who it doesn't really matter because he knocked him out. Actually, I'm looking now. I stand corrected. Wow, that's pretty crazy. Joseph Benavidez, John Dodson, and Ian McCall are all 28 years old.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a young-ass division. And Demetrius Johnson, guess that age.
Well, you see here. No, that's pretty cool. That's a very interesting fact. I don't know what to do with it, but I like it.
You can shove it right up your ass. Demetrius Johnson, how old do you think he is?
I'm going to say he is 26 years old.
That's a good call. Demetrius Johnson is 26. And
I actually didn't look that up. I know you probably think I did, but I didn't.
We didn't. Wink, wink, wink. Dodson's 3-0 now in the UFC. Wins against Dillashaw, Elliott, and Formiga, and I'm really interested in that title shot. So we'll move on swiftly to the co-main. Jake Ellenberger fighting on Jay Heron. Like we mentioned before, Koscheck, Ellenberger would have been a much more intriguing matchup, but Koscheck had to pull out due to an injured back, I believe it was. Heron looked better than I thought he would. I actually was predicting an Ellenberger knockout, just because Ellenberger's knocked out. He's finished some top guys. Knocked out Jake Shields, knocked out Sean Pearson, knocked out Mike Pyle, knocked out John Howard. Got knocked out by Martin Kamen in a stoppage that I still disagree with a lot. I feel like Ellenberger had Kamen in as much trouble in the first round as Kamen had him in the second round, but that's neither here nor there.
We're never going to agree on that, dude. We can argue until we're fucking just no blood in our bodies.
I'll always have blood in my body, at least one part. But yeah, that win against Jay Heron, it doesn't really do that much for Jake Ellenberger. I actually scored it 30-27 Ellenberger, but all three judges saw it 29-28 for Ellenberger. It was the first round. It was mostly standing. Second round, Ellenberger grinded him down, took him down on the ground, and held him down for a good portion of the second round. And it seemed like Heron was not that interested in trying to take the fight from Ellenberger, and in the third round just sort of laid there, or not laid there,
kind of like my last girlfriend.
Exactly like your last girlfriend, just ran away the entire time, and you chased her down until you got that victory. Exactly.
Yeah, this wasn't my favorite fight ever. It definitely wasn't the worst. You had a very measured Jake Ellenberger after suffering that crushing, loss to Martin Kamen, which he clearly lost that fight. He came back into this fight, and he was very measured and tentative. Not the Jake Ellenberger that we've seen in the octagon. This was the most safe and cautious Ellenberger. And then he had Jay Heron, a guy that had a 0-2 stretch in the UFC back in 2004, and since then has gone 17-3. Obviously improved greatly training out of Extreme Couture, training with some of the best out there. And I felt that this fight ultimately was won by a cut, which was suffered by Heron after Ellenberger hit him with a couple knees, and 2 takedowns. If you look at the rest of the fight, it was all Jay Heron. Even if Ellenberger was charging for it, Heron had some beautiful leg kicks. He was head kicking a lot, landed some nice shots. I think that overall the game plan, technique, and execution definitely went towards Jay Heron, but the judges looked at takedowns and a cut. So, I think that Ellenberger rightfully should have won it. He got those takedowns and battered Heron a little bit. So, where they go from here. I think Huron's going to get one more shot in the UFC against a mid-level guy. I'd like to see him face Diego Sanchez. Both of them have losses to Jake Ellenberger in their last fight. I think that makes the most sense. And Ellenberger obviously is going to get a decent opponent in his next fight. Maybe Thiago Alves or someone like that. Not really too sure.
Yeah, I really like the idea of him fighting Diego Sanchez. Also like the idea of him possibly fighting Brian Ebersol, a guy also recently brought in. Similar skills as Huron. That would be a pretty interesting scrap for me.
Absolutely. I enjoy it as well.
And for Ellenberger, who does he fight next?
Ellenberger, let's see, he's 1-1 in his last 2. If you look at that, before that he was 5. He had was it 5 or 6? I think it was 6. He had a 6-fight win streak. Yeah, so he's 7-1 in his last 8. That's really hard to find someone who's on that similar path. You know what? The winner of Fitch and Silva.
Fitch and Silva, I actually have 2 possible matchups out there. If Strikeforce is absolved by the UFC, I'd love to see Ellenberger Marquardt. If not, maybe the winner of Damian Maia and Rick Story at the upcoming UFC 153.
I don't think either of those guys deserve that fight, and Rick Story and Ellenberger have already fought. I think it was the fight before Ellenberger came to the UFC. He lost to Rick Story. It might have been one or two.
Exactly, and that would be a great fight for Story to prove whether that was real or whether
But Damian Maia doesn't deserve it at all. Like, if you think about it, if Maia wins, I think...
Now, if Maia's coming off wins against Kim and Story, I mean, keep in mind, Ellenberger got beaten in his last fight before fighting Jay Huron.
Yeah, I'm not really disagreeing with you as far as a style matchup goes or the revenge factor. I'm saying as far as legit wins. Look at Ellenberger. He's beat Shields, Sanchez, Pyle. Who else did he beat in there? He beat Pearson. He beat Hoka. Like, he has some really solid wins. His only losses in the UFC are to Condit and Kampman. Condit is the interim champ. Kampman is fighting Hendricks for a number 1 contender fight. I feel that Ellenberger has really solidified his spot in the top 10, whereas a guy like Story and Maia really haven't.
Yeah, and Ellenberger, Huron was definitely not on his level, so he at least deserves to be matched up against a guy who's fighting at the same level he is. Maybe a Marquardt if he comes into the UFC.
That's such a good fight.
That would be an amazing fight. Marquardt Ellenberger, Jesus tits.
How about this name?
How about Nick Diaz? Koscheck. Ooh.
They were supposed to fight.
Yeah. And both of them were coming off losses. Ellenberger to Kampman and Koscheck to Hendricks, and those two are fighting. I'd like to see that one made up. But Koscheck, I mean, he really needs to get back as soon as possible. He's not still young. He's 34. He's one of the oldest people and the elites of the welterweight division. Even though we all kind of think of him as that blonde-headed kid from The Ultimate Fighter. Back injuries are something that really plague you as you get older. If you don't believe me, look at Tito Ortiz. I would really enjoy seeing Koscheck Ellenberger. It would give me even more of a reason to root for Ellenberger, other than the fact that we share the same name.
Yeah, I would definitely vote for Ellenberger, considering the fact that he's one of the most exciting welterweights out there. There's a lot of exciting welterweights. You got Diaz, you got Kampman, Hendricks, you got Silva, all these guys that are really great. But the one thing about Nick Diaz
sitting on the sidelines,
who knows what's going on with that guy?
His last fight was in February, which means hopefully in 4 months he'll be off that suspension, and be able to fight again.
I agree. He's been one of my favorite fighters out there for a long time. I'd love to see him make his comeback and get an immediate title shot against the winner of Condit and GSP. I think he deserves it more than anyone.
And if you believe Carlos Condit won the 5th round and beat Nick Diaz, please promptly go fuck yourself, because Nick Diaz won that fight. That is also neither here nor there.
Ellenberger, the reason why I just have a lot of stock in that guy is I've been watching him for a long time. I watched him fight in the IFL back in 2007. Did really well against Delson Heleno, who fought in the recent Tough Brazil. But what I like about the guy is that for that first round, for that first round, he's a wild card, dude. You have no idea if he's going to knock someone out. And yes, he's had gas issues. I don't really know how someone could have such horrible cardio.
I had gas issues yesterday. It was not
I know
good.
you did. I heard it. But that's neither here nor there. Jake Ellenberger, actually, what impressed me the most out of his entire UFC career, it's not the Shields finish, it's not the Diego Sanchez fight. It was his fight with Carlos Condit, which I thought kind of got snuffed for Fight of the Year. He took a flush Carlos Condit head kick, and it hit him like in the bottom of the jaw where anyone else would have been knocked out. And he stood there, didn't get wobbled at all, didn't get rocked, and like kind of touched his chin with his hand, like, come on, bring it.
Started yelling at him. What? What?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I have so much respect for the guy. He's not only is he a good mixed martial artist with knockout power, but goddamn can he take a shot and keep on trucking, unless his opponent's name is Martin Kamen.
Sorry.
Know how that
yeah. Ellenberger, truly one of my favorite fighters in the welterweight division. He has a bright future. Another one of these young guys. As Koscheck's one of the older guys in the top 10 of the welterweight division. Ellenberger, I believe, is the youngest. Everyone from CR to Penn, Maia, Koscheck, Hendricks, Diaz, Marquardt, Condit, Kampman. None of them are 27 or younger. Jake Ellenberger's 27 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. The sky's the limit. I think that, I've always said he should work on his cardio, and the last fight proved that he has been working on it. Finally, the kryptonite in his tool belt. If you think about it, he's gotten out of submissions. He's knocked people out. He can wrestle. So the one thing that he was missing was that really high-level cardio. So I think his next fight, he's going to improve even more and put on a great show.
My empty kryptonite, yeah. So enough with the Three Doors Down. We'll go on to the main card. God, that was a shitty joke. As I was seeing it, I was like, "Oh God, this is horrible. Why the fuck? Why the fuck?"
I didn't even know what it was, to be honest, until you said Three Doors Down. I was like, "Oh yeah, that band from
that one
whenever they
shitty song from like '96." I was later than '96. God, we're talking about Three Doors Down. God damn it. Antonio Silva versus Travis Brown, bizarre to say the least. Silva looked good. I really don't want to take away from Silva's performance, but Silva backed Brown up against the cage. It actually looked like Brown, sort of like Dwayne Ludwig did a week before, which is really weird because you rarely ever see a guy blow out his leg and fall awkwardly and limp around and obviously have a nagging injury. Ludwig blew out his leg last week. I thought Brown blew out his leg. Actually, he had a torn hamstring, which I'll sing praises to that guy all day, because that has got to be such a painful injury. I've actually blown out my knee before, and
Me too. That shit sucks.
Yeah, it sucks, but it isn't as painful as a broken bone or a torn muscle. Popping out near a knee, you just know something's wrong. If anything, it's numb. I actually tore my ACL and my meniscus.
Same here.
It was a partial tear. Luckily, I didn't need to have any surgery. But a torn muscle is a whole different ballgame. That has got to be blinding pain. And Brown was hopping around on one leg trying to fight this, like literally this giant. And Silva ran in there, stopped the fight. You actually have a pretty interesting take on the fight that you can enlighten your listeners with.
Yeah, I'm all for guys going out there and having some kind of injury and coming back to win. If you look at Randy Couture at UFC 74, he fought Gabriel Gonzaga. And in the third round, Gonzaga kicked Couture so hard he broke his forearm. And Couture came back to knock out Gonzaga in the next round with said broken forearm. It's like guys can go out there, and if they're highly trained and highly motivated and have warrior spirit, yes, they can get injured and come back. But when it's such an apparent injury that a guy obviously blew something out, the commentators are talking about it, he's hopping around, his mobility is completely gone, and he is a agile heavyweight. That's half of his game. His whole game is moving around quick, feinting and then throwing explosive strikes. I really feel that the ref is the one to blame for this fight. I think it should have been stopped. I think the ref should have at least walked up, had the doctors come in, check it, and clear him. Like, okay, are you sure you want to fight? Can he fight? Okay, let's go. And that didn't happen. And I think that's some oversight that needs to be fixed in the future. That's my opinion. A lot of people will say, oh, well, you're taking away from Bigfoot Silva, and his win and knocking him out. I'm not at all.
Taking away from Bigfoot Silva and his win and knocking him out.
Yeah, thank you. I thought that Bigfoot did a great job. He looked very measured. He was covering his head very well. He landed some super hard shots and finished the fight. Congratulations to Bigfoot. But in the same token, you can't be that proud knowing that a guy blew out his own knee throwing an overhand right. I'm sorry. That fight should have been stopped.
I'm not exactly sure. Dua, you have any idea? I know when a guy can't see out of one eye, the ref runs in and stops it. If there's a cut so deep that it looks like it could do permanent damage, it's stopped. But does a fighter necessarily need to be able to stand on both legs?
As far as eye injuries go, that's what we're talking about, right? If someone can't see.
Yeah, I know. Like we had Kingsbury versus Mantua. Kingsbury could see fine out of one eye, but the other eye was literally swollen shut, and the ref came in and stopped it. I'm not talking about if a fighter can't stand on both of his legs, can a doctor come in and stop it?
I don't actually know if that's the case, which is something I intend to research because the doctor's provisions, what they can or can't do, is something I'm not extremely, knowledgeable of. I know some things are objective and they're up to that specific doctor. Does that person think with their knowledge that this person can continue? So you're right. It's a very gray area. I know that guys have been leg kicked so hard that they fall over and don't get up and the ref stops it. Well, this is kind of in the same vein. A guy is, hobbling around. Wouldn't you think that if you were a professional mixed martial arts ref, that you would step in there and at the very least, check on the fighter. Hey, how's your leg? Are you all right? And do some kind of test for mobility and bring in a doctor. I think that's something that was missing.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but I also feel like Brown is one of these warriors, a Hawaiian guy, which... Hawaiians are, known for being extremely durable, hanging in there, even with, bad injuries. Penn's an example. He's a warrior. I don't necessarily think Brown would have wanted the fight to stop there, but it was pretty unfortunate. I'm definitely in the same boat as you. I think 7 or 8 times out of 10, Travis Brown wins this fight, and I don't want to take away from Silva's win, but at the same time, I don't want to put too much stock in this loss for Travis Brown.
Well, yeah, and Bigfoot, until that injury, looked slow and plodding. Yes, his hands were up higher. He was protecting his face.
My head is bigger than your head.
Dude, he was.
That was an intense stare down. Jesus Christ! Literally, I think Silva's head was twice as big as Travis Brown's.
He had his hands up higher during the whole fight. If you look at Bigfoot Silva's fight in the past, his hands are maybe shoulder level. So if you look at this fight, he was protecting himself more, coming off of 2 first-round finishes. Obviously, he didn't want to have a repeat performance and get cut. So he was looking better. But on the same time, Travis Brown looked like he was in a different weight class, hopping around, throwing high kicks and knees and just awesome strikes. So when a guy like that can't continue with that kind of style, like you said, I think that Travis Brown probably wins that fight more than 7 out of 10. I'd say 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I was actually going to say 9 first, but I didn't want to go overboard. I didn't think about it until our roundtable show. You had a really good proposition for Travis Brown's next opponent, and that's also a young up-and-comer who's coming off a loss, both 30 years old, Brown versus Stipe Miocic. That would be an excellent fight. It's hard to imagine if they did get matched up against each other that either one would be on a 2-fight lose streak after their meteoric rises. Both of them were undefeated coming, before a couple weeks ago. Miocic losing to Stefan Struve and Brown losing, obviously, to Antonio Silva.
Both in the second round, both against the cage, and both by punches.
Silva's was in the first round, actually.
Yeah, sorry about
Dumb
that.
Idiot.
But still by the same means, nonetheless.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what was up with Miocic. Like, he came out a completely different fighter there in the second round. But, yeah, as far as Antonio Silva goes, I'd like to see him fight the winner of Big Nog and Dave Herman.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. That makes perfect sense. I know that Silva doesn't really train with the traditional Brazilian gym. He's been bouncing between ATT and Victory Athletics, so I know he's kind of in between. And then Herman trains in the Midwest, and Big Nog obviously trains at his own gym in Black House. So I absolutely see Silva facing that winner, considering that Big Nog and Herman were coming off losses. So the winner of that fight makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I'm thinking of everyone else. The elite heavyweights. Obviously, Dos Santos, Velasquez are fighting for the title. Overeem will be coming off of that injury. You don't really know what's going to happen with Cormier and Barnett. They're still technically over in Strikeforce. Frank Mir injured recently. I can't think of any other top heavyweights who really deserve a shot. You have Verdum and Struve, who are likely going to fight each other next. Yeah, it's kind of crowded now. It's one thing I kind of want to throw in there that's hard to believe. Top Strikeforce heavyweights Daniel Cormier and Josh Barnett. You think of Cormier as a newcomer in the sport. Barnett has been fighting for over a decade, fought in Pride, fought in UFC, fought in Strikeforce. Barnett is only 1 year older than Daniel Cormier.
Really?
Yeah. Josh Barnett's 34 years old. Daniel Cormier's 33.
Wow. Well, you got to think mileage, though. You look at Daniel Cormier, he's been wrestling.
Exactly.
And then you look at Barnett, who has been fighting professionally for almost, 12, 15 years? Something like that. Something crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, was a competitor in the 2004 and 2008 Olympics. I guess that wrestling really doesn't take nearly as much out of your body as mixed martial arts does. To put it in a little bit of comparison, it's hard to believe Barnett is only 1 year older than Cormier. Barnett made his professional MMA debut 1997, January 11th, 97.
15
so almost
years,
in
dude.
96.
15 years. Jesus
the beginning of 97. So you may as well say fucking 96.
Also,
Daniel
the same
Cormier
year
makes his debut almost. What is that? Almost 13 years later, September 09. In Strikeforce Challenger.
And how crazy is it that Vitor Belfort made his UFC debut in the same year and just fought for a title against John Jones? That's incredible, man.
Yeah, I mean, but if you really want to talk about longitude, Randy Couture, Jesus Christ, dude fought Lyoto Machida at what, age 48?
I believe so. I think it was 48, or 49, something crazy like that.
Yeah, really, really insane. Yeah, born in 1963. The guy is an absolute warrior. Also, also made his MMA debut in 97, actually at UFC 13.
Whoa, really? So,
yeah.
Couture, Barnett, and Belfort all made their debuts at the same year. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. May 30th, 1997, UFC 13. Really, really crazy stuff there. Belfort actually also fought at UFC 13. And Chris, I know you're really good at rattling off fights, but do you have any idea who Vitor Belfort fought at UFC 13?
It's either Scott Ferozzo or Wanderlei Silva or some guy named Tony.
Tank Abbott.
Tank Abbott, okay. That's right. It was the heavyweight tournament. He was the heavyweight tournament winner. It was Tank Abbott, then Scott Ferozzo, I believe.
Yep, and after beating Tank Abbott, he'd go on to lose to none other than Randy Couture.
Woo!
Crazy, crazy stuff. MMA, it's really fun. One of the coolest parts about becoming a fan of it was just learning the history. Like, what? Like, these two guys who are still at the top now? I mean, like, Like Belfort fought Couture in 97, Vanderlei Silva in 98, Gilbert Yvel in 2000, Sakuraba in 99. Like he every year fought Heath Herring in 01, Chuck Liddell in 02. I could go on and on, but it's really hard to believe these guys have gone through over a decade of punishment and not only are still physically spry, but are still, mentally with it and mentally happy. I mean, Jesus Christ, I couldn't see myself within the first, 10 years of fighting. Oh, yeah, you have to fight Henderson, Overeem, Tito Ortiz, Couture, Liddell, Yvel, Vanderlei Silva. Pretty much the who's who of historical
Anderson
MMA.
Silva, Rich Franklin, Forrest...
John Jones.
John Jones.
Jesus Christ. As far as difficulty of opponents through your entire career, I might want to give it to Belfort, because he fought Jones in his prime, Silva in his prime, Franklin in his prime, Henderson in his prime, Chuck Liddell in his prime, Sakuraba in his prime, Vanderlei.
Wait, he fought Dan Henderson?
He fought Dan Henderson at Pride 32 in 2006.
Wow, who won?
Dan Henderson won a decision, and actually, unfortunately, Belfort, that was the fight where he tested positive for elevated levels of testosterone.
Right. I think that Dan Henderson and Vitor Belfort have had the hardest competition. You look at Dan; he's had Anderson Silva, Fedor Emelianenko, Rich Franklin, Rusmar Palhares, just, all these guys, Shogun Hua, and then you look at Belfort and you're like, okay, well, he fought Overeem. It's just kind of crazy. I think that those guys have, as far as who they've fought, probably the stiffest competition.
Definitely, and the reason for my delayed response there, I was Q-tipping the wax out of my ears because it was bugging me. Thank you, Q-tip during pods, and that is why we don't video stream ourselves. We just flash up a pretty picture of our logo and our number, which again, I don't know why you wouldn't know, because if you're listening live, you're looking straight at a little thing that says call in 213-457-3380, but if you're listening
every week, you don't call.
And every week, yes, I'm talking to you dirty fuck, you don't call us, and I've been waiting on your call every week.
We haven't.
And you said you were going to call, and you didn't.
Please call. Please call.
213-457-3380. If you're listening to a delayed version, and you're like, oh, I'll just store that in my phone so I can listen live Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We usually go about 2 horas, which is 2 hours in English. Just store it in your phone, because it'll be that number every week. 213-457-3380. Tweet us. Visit the website. None of you motherfuckers have tweeted at us, which I know for a fact we get over 1 billion listeners every week. So I find it statistically hard to believe that nobody's tweeting or calling in. But if any of the billion of you... No, I'm just kidding. It's 1. If you, which I'm literally talking to you, that one guy, fucking call us right now.
Yeah,
I'll
just
get pissy.
Stop being so weird. We're going to talk to you, and we're going to ask you how you're doing. We're going to ask you how you're doing. We want to know, what...
I'm going to ask about your prior relationships.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to get, before we start waxing poetic like on UFC 153, you want to do our fights we're pumped for?
I would love nothing more.
Let us do that, Dan. We do this at the top of every month, so we had this prepared for last week's Lost episode. I was gonna pick new fights, but part of me just wants to brag that I picked these 2 fights for the fights that I'm pumped for, and I'll give you my reasoning. I've Palashevsky Nunes, which sort of played out the exact same way I thought it was. Nunes, a very well-rounded striker. Palashevsky can land bombs. Both of them have iron chins. Obviously, Diego Nunez outlasted Bart Palashevsky, but I was proud to have picked that because it won fight of the night. And I also picked John Dodson versus Jussier da Silva, which was my second favorite fight of the evening. I can't stand, I'm kind of in the same boat as Pat Barry, I can't stand people who try and boo these flyweight fights, because I find these lighter weight fights absolutely intriguing. These, these dudes are so light. They move so incredibly fast. If you're a weathered MMA fan, you've seen enough knockouts. I don't care if every fight ends in a cold knockout. I've seen a lot of pretty cold knockouts. I just want to see a good fight, and if you can't appreciate, guys with skilled footwork like Dodson and De Silva, both of them are extremely skilled grapplers too. You're fucking, I don't know why you're even watching these fights, because these guys put on a show. So I had Palashevsky Nunes, I had Dodson De Silva. My future fight on the list that I'm pumped for, a lot of people might disagree with me. I'm looking forward to Anderson Silva versus Stephan Bonnar. I know it's very, very one-sided, at least in Vegas. 99% of the MMA community has Anderson Silva winning, and I'm one of them. But Bonnar's never been stopped in his career, with the exception of a cut, and you can't really call that is at the bottom of stoppages, because you're not getting finished, you're not getting submitted, you're not getting knocked out, you're not tapping out. It's just, someone landed a glancing elbow, a glancing knee, and you got cut, whatever. This is, I would bet the farm on this being the most competitive fight Anderson Silva's had at 205, which admittedly isn't saying much. He embarrassed Forrest Griffin, embarrassed James Irvin. I don't think he's going to embarrass Stephan Bonnar, but he's never fought a guy as big as Stephan Bonnar who's going to test him like Stephan Bonner's going to test him. I think Anderson Silva wins, but I think it goes the full 15 minutes. Go ahead, Chris.
Brave call, sir. Very brave call. The fights I'm pumped for are Big Nog versus Dave Herman. I think they're very similar in their past in the UFC. Big Nog is kind of an older guy who had a career resurgence when he knocked out Brendan Schaub at UFC 134, and then came back and got absolutely destroyed by Frank Mir in the rematch. Looked good in the opening 2 minutes, was rocking Frank Mir, got on the ground, got too complacent, and got his arm broken. And then you have Dame Herman, who kind of came into the UFC very heralded as a very athletic heavyweight, and has since gone 1-2, all finishes. He knocked out John Olavinimo, got finished by Stefan Struve on the ground, and got completely blasted by Big Country. I think they both have a lot of proof in this fight, and I can't wait to see it. My second pick is Glover Teixeira versus Fabio Maldonado. This wasn't the original fight. It was supposed to be Glover versus Rampage, which I was much more pumped for, but they have found a guy in Fabio Maldonado who has some awesome boxing, and Glover is one of those guys who is kind of a dark horse in the division. Everyone says he's just a beast. And, having only seen one of his fights in the UFC against Kyle Kingsbury, I'd like to see him live up to the hype. I think he's very well-rounded, has kind of punches like Mike Tyson, has obviously a ground game, getting an arm triangle on Kyle Kingsbury, who's no joke. So that's going to be great come fight night. But the one I'm most pumped for is Phil Davis versus Wagner Prado.
Woo!
Yeah, exactly. Wagner was... He made his debut recently, a couple months ago. He got poked in the eye by Phil Davis, and the doctor stopped the fight. I felt really bad for him. He was really just crying and just totally... yeah, he was destroyed by it. It was bad, but he only has
I just want to beat that guy!
He only has 8 pro fights, and he actually got the chance to train with Black House off of a reality show, which I find very intriguing and compelling. I mean, he had no fight experience before that. Everyone at Black House liked him so much that they said, okay, come on in and train with us. And he's been on a tear, a very serious 205er. Then you have Phil Davis, who got dominated by Rashad and then had this fight. So there's a lot of questions that Phil Davis has to answer. And those are the fights I'm pumped for.
Woo! Yeah, that Wagner-Davis fight is going to be intriguing, to say the least, at least for the minute and a half that they were going at it. It looked like they were measuring each other out. It was shaping up to be a pretty exciting fight. Jesus Christ, was that main event, Shogun versus Vera. Like, Shogun... As far as people who put on exciting fights, yeah, there are people like Anderson Silva and go out there and give you a knockout every time. But Jesus Christ, every fight Shogun Rua is in, it's an absolute war.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Co-signed.
Absolutely, an absolute war. Co-signed by Chris Lowenstein.
That's me.
That's you. We don't want to get too verbose, but maybe we can run down the UFC 153 card in about 15-20 and then hit the news topics before we bow out. UFC 153 originally headlined by Eric Koch versus Jose Aldo. Koch replaced by Edgar after suffering an injury in training. Then Aldo actually gets a foot injury, has got to pull out. I don't know if it's been rescheduled yet, but I think we're going to see Frankie Edgar fight Jose Aldo. Apparently the foot injury isn't anything too bad, just something that wasn't, going to be completely healed up by this weekend. We'll just go over the main card, I guess. We got 6 fights, starting off with Damian Maia versus Rick Story, a fight we talked about earlier. I don't think you give either of these guys enough credit. Maia definitely was a bizarre fight against Kim. I'm not going to say it wasn't, but Maia, beats Kim in the first round, less than a minute in, fights Weidman, which, Jesus Christ, Weidman looked like an absolute machine against Mark Munoz. Didn't really look nearly that impressive when he fought Maia.
He had to cut 30 pounds in, 24 hours? Something like that?
Man, I will do that right now. No, I won't. That would be horrible. I would feel like absolute shit the next day. But, if you're going to accept to take the fight, you got to be ready to fight. Story, a lot of people don't know what to make out of him. He rattled off 3 super impressive wins in a row versus Hazlett, Hendricks, and Alves. And that was back in 2010 when Hazlett was hot shit. Then he lost to Charlie Brenneman, Martin Kampman, kind of bumped him back down, fought a newcomer, Brock Jardine, was able to grind him out to a unanimous decision. So I think the winner of this fight's back in the at least the top 15, the elite of the welterweight division, which in my opinion is the most stacked division in the UFC.
Well, agree, disagree, man. I think Rick Story has had a less than impressive run in the UFC. He beat Thiago Alves by a decent performance, lost to Brenneman. Hasn't really looked that great lately, and Damian Maia was a phenom. I had a lot of respect for the guy. When he was, I think 5 fights in a row, he got submission of the night and became a mediocre kickboxer. So you're right, I don't put a lot of stock into these guys, but that's just because I think mainly they're boring as shit. I like both of them, but I think they're very skilled, but they just haven't impressed in the last couple of years.
I think it goes to a decision, and I think Damian Maia wins.
Yeah, I've got Rick Story. Split decision.
Splitsville. Moving on, we got Phil Davis versus Wagner Prado. We pretty much went over the history of that. The no contest in August where Davis poked Prado in the eye. Davis, I was all aboard the Phil Davis war wagon until he fought Rashad Evans and looked horrible.
Yeah, he didn't even look that good against Little Nog, if you remember that fight.
Yeah, that was also a unanimous decision.
Yeah, he didn't look that great in that fight either, though. I mean, he dominated the last half of the second round, and other than that, the fight was close. So, I've got Wagner Prado winning by knockout, and I'm just following my heart.
I have Phil Davis winning by submission. And I know Prado is very skilled in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, trained at Team Nogueira for a while, but Phil is a freak athlete and is very, very skilled at both wrestling and at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, he submitted Tim Boach by the Mr. Wonderful submission. That's all I have to say. He choked out Alexander Gustafsson in the first round, which, obviously I don't need to tell the MMA fan that Alexander Gustafsson is a elite light heavyweight. I think what's going to win the fight for Davis is just pure athleticism in this.
That's a good call. I think that's a smart call. I probably shouldn't be voting for Wagner Prado, but Damn, I want him to win.
Hurt. Scared. Moving down the line, welterweight fight, John Fitch versus Eric Silva, something we can talk about a little bit more. Fitch coming off that loss, losing to Hendricks. He hasn't actually fought since last year, 2011, and Eric Silva, which actually we did not mention this. Shit, I meant to mention this at the beginning of the show, just earlier tonight. Our boy Chris was co-hosting the Joe Show Radio, friends with the owner over there. That was, yeah. I mean, I really don't like to listen to sports podcasts much. When I listen to a podcast, which working 40 hours a week, I don't really have that much time, especially when I can't listen to podcasts at work. Which is kind of shitty. You think if I'm interning and I'm not getting paid, I can at least put a headphone in while I do data entry.
Yeah,
that's neither here nor there. I don't usually like listening to sports podcasts, but I really enjoyed hearing you and Brad talk MMA on the Joe Show Radio. I was thoroughly impressed. I was like, damn, why can't he do this on our fucking podcast? Jesus, no, I'm kidding. It was a really, really, really awesome performance out there on the Joe Show Radio. It was cool hearing you chat it up with Brad. I was gonna call in, but I was a little busy feeling my penis.
Yeah,
so
just real quick, something I want to add is that the Joe Show podcast is actually the first MMA podcast I ever listened to. I had been only listening to Joe Rogan, and then I loaded up iTunes one day, and I'm like, maybe there's MMA podcasts out there, and I searched MMA podcasts, and I chose the Joe Show Radio podcast based solely on their icon, which is Wanderlei Silva screaming, and he has headphones on. I was like, that's really cool. So I listened to it. I was a caller and a listener for a long time. That's actually the infamous podcast where I had to drink my own pee because I went for Brian Stan instead of Chael Sonnen in their fight. And this is actually the second time I've been on their podcast. First time I filled in on a Thanksgiving pod when I think Brad had some guy on there. But regardless, it was nice to go on there, and he was more than willing to give us some shout outs. So, it's just nice to have some mutual love.
Yeah, and if you guys don't listen to Joe Show, definitely check out joeshowradio.com. They have a much, much more fancier site than we do. Definitely subscribe to them on iTunes as well. They really put out some great shit. I was going to say before we get into Fitch versus Silva, that was probably smart to listen to an MMA podcast and then host. I've listened to sports radio, it's all mainstream sports radio, so if they talk about MMA, it's, hey, we're going to have Kevin James on to talk about Here Comes the Boom for 30 seconds, and then talk about more football. I started hosting the MMA podcast, or then it was MMA at work, before I listened to a single MMA podcast. It was horrible form, but I guess over time I was able to get better, even though I still suck total ass.
Time heals all, and you do good, man. You do good. As long as you're not stuttering, just stepping over yourself, you're doing good.
I try not to. I die.
And there goes our last listener in the wind.
Yeah, I really don't think I suck. I just like to be self-degrading sometimes. 'Cause that shit's funny. Welterweight fight, John Fitch versus Eric Silva. Silva, which the reason I got to the Joe Show Radio, I heard you saying on Joe Show Radio, you compared him to Rory McDonald, which I think is a really, really apt comparison. Both of them are the big up-and-comers in the light heavyweight division, or the welterweight division, sorry. Silva coming off, crazy wins. Looks like this Brazilian guy really, really has an all-around game. Great grappler, amazing standing up. Is obviously going to want to stand and bang with John Fitch. John Fitch, wet blanket. I don't need to say anymore, do I?
John Fitch is a very skilled guy who has shown that he can finish. He finished Thiago Alves. He choked out a few guys in his early career. And since moving up the ranks has turned into a absolute bore fest. I mean, his only fight in recent memory that was good was the BJ Penn and Mike Pierce fights, and he got his ass kicked.
And to go back to his most recent impressive finish versus Thiago Alves, that was in June '06, more than 6 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. Silva has proved he can beat good guys. He beat Charlie Brenneman. I don't think Brenneman is near the fighter that Fitch is. You can't really blame Eric Silva for that Carlo Prater fight. That was a really controversial finish with the strikes to the back of the head that weren't strikes to the back of the head. Part of me, my gut honestly wants to say Fitch by unanimous decision, but just for the sake of the fact that I want to see Eric Silva win, I'm going to say Silva second round knockout.
Yeah, the safe bet would be John Fitch, but I think Eric Silva is one of these phenoms. I mean, he reminds me a lot, not in looks or body type, but just the fighting style of Vitor Belfort. He's young, he's confident, he runs off the cage, he does all these unorthodox techniques. I definitely see Silva winning by finish.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna play devil's advocate here. If you're saying Silva by a finish, I'm not gonna say Silva beat Brenneman, but he hasn't fought nearly the kind of wrestler that John Fitch is. If John Fitch is really focused, I think he'll win this fight. But honestly, it doesn't seem like he is. I just can't say I think Fitch is gonna win, because whenever I see fighters make excuses before the fight, whether it was Forrest Griffin before the second time he fought Shogun, whether it was Rampage in his fight against Ryan Bader, he lost that, right?
Ryan Bader lost what? His fight against
Rampage who? Lost to Ryan Bader,
yes,
correct?
Yes, correct.
UFC
144.
Yeah, he was making excuses before the Jones and the Bader fight. Didn't make weight. Obviously wasn't focused. I don't see John Fitch winning simply because he's been making so many excuses.
Yeah, I needed the money because I bought a second house and I had a kid and I was coming off an injury. So Johnny Hendricks won that by being lucky because I was so unfocused. Like, seriously, man? Like, I have no respect for that at all. If you can, produce doctors, like x-rays and just say, okay, look here, I was injured for this fight. That's one thing. But to bring up a litany of excuses is another. And I think you're right. I think an unfocused John Fitch, who kind of is trying to run around the bush with his excuses, is going to get completely blasted on fight night.
And what's kind of funny, I remember I was watching, I forget if it was when before he fought Penn at 127 or Hendricks at 141. It was sometime last year. I was watching a UFC primetime episode that was covering, or a UFC countdown rather, that was covering Fitch training for his next opponent. And there was a 2 or 3 minute segment in there where he was bragging about how he just bought this juiced up truck, and it was like this huge truck, and he had to like grab this giant pole and pull himself up into the driver's seat. He's like, "Yep, I always wanted me a big old pickup truck." And less than a year later, or a year and change later, you're all of a sudden broke and you have to fight just to feed your family. Come on, man.
Yeah, not much to say about that, really.
No. Let's go to the top 3 matchups. Glover Teixeira was originally going to fight Rampage Jackson. Rampage fell out due to an injury. Rashad Evans actually turned down the fight, which if Rashad Evans is refusing to fight you, I think Evans is a top 3, a top 5, if not top 3 guy at light heavyweight. The fact that he refused to fight Glover Teixeira says a lot about Teixeira. Fabio Maldonado being a G, stepping in there, even though he's coming off 2 losses to Kyle Kingsbury and Igor Pekrajic, fighters who are not nearly at the level that Glover Teixeira is at. I think everyone agrees that Teixeira is going to win this. But big ups to Fabio Maldonado for stepping in. I don't think the UFC will cut him just because this is the co-main event, or it's the third fight down. But Glover Teixeira, he's coming off 16 straight wins, one of the longest win streaks in MMA. His last 4 wins, all in the first round. He had his UFC debut against Kyle Kingsbury May 26th, which we actually mentioned a couple weeks ago when we were breaking down the Jimmy Manuwa versus Kyle Kingsbury fight. If it's a testament to anyone, it's a testament to Glover Teixeira, because Jimmy Manuwa put an absolute hammering on Kyle Kingsbury and couldn't finish him. Kyle Kingsbury had it needed to be in by the doctor because he couldn't see out of his left eye. And after the fight's over, you find out he has multiple fractures in his face. Like, Jimmy Manuwa put it to Kingsbury and couldn't finish him. Glover Teixeira finished homie in less than 2 minutes, albeit by a submission. You know, Jesus Christ, this Glover kid's scary.
Not only that, but you're missing a very key point that Maldonado fought Kingsbury. They had a fight that went 3 rounds, and Kingsbury's one of his eyes was swollen shut, and he had marks all over his face. The only reason that Kingsbury won was off of, I think, 1 or 2 takedowns, and he blasted Maldonado with knees from the clinch. And Kingsbury isn't a small guy; he's 6'4". So imagine the leverage he can get in that. And Maldonado walked through it and threw punches. So I kind of see it as a unstoppable force versus immovable object when Teixeira takes on Maldonado on fight night.
Do the MMA math. You can't. Yeah, it's not going to be a pretty one. You know, I was kind of surprised. I like looking at the Vegas odds just for shits and giggles to see where the pros put each one of these fights. You know, I think Glover Teixeira has more of a chance of beating Fabio Maldonado than Anderson Silva has to beat Stephan Bonner. I think Stephan Bonner has a little bit more chance to pull off the upset. You know, like you said, they have a shared opponent in Kingsbury. Glover Teixeira is an absolute beast, although kind of untested in the UFC. His only win in the UFC is against Kyle Kingsbury. You know, Fabio's coming off 2 straight losses. Like, come on, son. But it was actually not even close. I think Glover Teixeira is minus about 350 in Vegas, which means to make $100 profit, you need to bet $350. Anderson Silva, add another 1,000 to that. Anderson Silva is minus 1,350, which means they're saying he's 4 times more of a favorite than Glover Teixeira is. That's pretty wild, isn't it?
Very wild, dude. I don't really follow odds, but that's kind of boggling. That's
yeah,
pretty gnarly,
yeah,
dude.
Yeah. Very, very, very gnarly. If you're a true MMA fan and you're putting money on Anderson and not Glover Teixeira, and also if you don't like blue cheese with your wings, then you can go fuck your mother. So yeah, you have anything more on this Teixeira Maldonado fight before we move to the co-main?
Not at all. Let's do it.
Not at all. Big Nog versus Dave Herman. Big Nog coming off. Like my least favorite thing about seeing the promos for Dos Santos Mir was like every 5 seconds when they showed the Mir highlights. Snap, snap, snap. You know, it's kind of like when chicken wings, you have the drumstick, and what is the other one? Is it like the
breast?
thigh?
No. Breast, thigh.
No, like you order a thing of chicken wings, and you either get a drumstick or like the little thing with 2 bones. What is that called?
The wishbone?
No. God, this is amazing pod. But, okay, you get a thing of chicken wings, and there are 2 different types of wings. You either have the big drumstick that has 1 bone and you gnarl around, or the kind of chicken wing that has 2 bones and you like gotta like fish the meat like out in.
That's literally
in
called
the 2 bones.
A wing.
Oh, that is the wing. There, something that you would think a grown adult would know, but I actually don't know. It's a kind of like whenever you're like trying to get meat out of it and you snap one of the bones, which I'm glad I spent an entire minute and a half just to nail down this metaphor. It's kind of like when you snap apart a chicken wing. Yeah, he put so much torque behind that. Big Nog has been on the shelf recovering from that single injury. Shit, how long ago was Mir versus Big Nog? It was like late 2011. I mean, it was a while ago. Like a true BJJ gangster, doesn't tap, technical submission. been on the rack since that, fighting Dave Herman, who is a gangster on his own, even though he's coming off 2 losses. It's against top heavyweights, Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve. Before that, he had a really nice TKO victory against John Olaf Einemo. I really like Herman. Herman fighting out of Team Quest. Wrestling is going to be his strength. Jiu-Jitsu is going to be Big Nog's strength. I usually give the edge to a wrestler, but I see Big Nog taking this one.
Well, considering I broke this down for the fights I'm pumped for, I'm just going to go ahead and say I've got Nogueira in this one by a finish. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do as well. Pee Wee, I think he's a top 20 guy here in the UFC. But Big Nog really proved that his age hasn't gotten to him yet when he fought Brendan Schaub and knocked him out 3 minutes in. I mean, maybe it was just that Rio crowd pumping him up, which luckily he's going to be fighting with again this weekend. But God, that was the highlight of UFC 134.
It goddamn was. Whew. Nutty.
I mean, especially when I'm watching fights alone, which I believe I didn't have any friends over for that one. I was just chilling watching that. I rarely get up out of my chair when I'm watching a fight, but that was one I leapt out like, wah! Because everyone thought Schaub, he's the hybrid. He's young. He's spry. He's going to take out Big Nog. Big Nog's like, son. And underdog in that fight took out Schaub, even though he got his arm twisted off basically by Frank Mir. I think if you get in a bad spot with Frank Mir, which that was one of the most technical rolls I've ever seen. I mean, there was literally going from Mir going for one submission until he transitioned to the Kimura. I think that was like 3 or 4 different moves in the course of a second and a half.
Here's what happened. Dude.
Here's what happened.
Here's what hacky. I love Tom Arnold.
I love getting torqued.
Basically, Big Nog was in side control, and Mir was in side control. Big Nogueira flipped him over into the opposite side control where Nogueira was on top, and then Frank used the momentum to flip it back to side control top for himself, and that's where he cranked it. So they exchanged side control moves for at least 30 seconds.
Yeah, and obviously both of these guys, I mean, it's kind of crazy. 3 of the top grapplers in the world, all in the same division in the UFC, Verdum, Big Nog, and Mir. God, they're all absolute beasts rolling with jiu-jitsu. So let's get to the light heavyweight fight. Greatest fighter of all time, Anderson Silva, fighting in light heavyweight for the 3rd time. I believe he's 11-0 at middleweight. He's 2-0 at light heavyweight. Like I mentioned earlier, his 2 fights at light heavyweight haven't even been close. He's absolutely murdered Forrest Griffin and James Irvin, making quick work out of both of them. But Stephan Bonnar, I mean, it looked like he was going to retire. He announced his retirement, coming off 3 straight wins. And he jumps in there to take on Anderson Silva. I don't think either of us think Stephan Bonnar has more than a puncher's chance, which I don't even know if he has a puncher's chance. I think it'll be a moral victory for Stephan Bonnar if he lasts 15 minutes. It's actually going to be the first 3-round main event since UFC 138, which I believe was in Liban Munoz. And after that, they started doing 5-round fights. Anderson Silva is he's the greatest fighter of all time, and Stephan Bonnar is not even a top 20 light heavyweight. Yeah,
I broke down this fight once today on a podcast, and you talked about it earlier as well.
So I'm not breaking it down on this one. God damn it.
No, I will. Basically, I think that it's a rocky kind of a situation. You have this guy who's kind of old and broken down, white guy taking on a phenom who is very darkly skinned. So
he's black.
Yes, definitely. Kind of a thing where you're rooting for Stephan Bonnar. Do I really think that Stephan Bonnar can win? No. Do I think he can survive the 3 rounds? Yes. I've got Anderson Silva unanimous decision.
Survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jones couldn't even finish Stephan Bonnar. He's one of the few opponents of John Jones that went to a decision. I think the only people that have lasted from bell to bell with John Jones, Stephan Bonnar, Guzmão, and Rashad Evans. I think that's it. And Guzmão was his first fight in the UFC, so it was a big step up from Battle Cage Extreme to the UFC. Bonner's got an iron chin, but I just can't think of a way that Stephan Bonnar could beat Anderson Silva. He's not going to submit him. He's not going to knock him out. He isn't going to outlast him like Chael Sonnen and get a decision win. Anderson Silva is going to win either by KO or by decision. I say by decision, and I don't like the trailers going on now that are completely, they're lying to the casual MMA fan, saying UFC 153, see an amazing knockout or a historic upset. Not necessarily. Stephan Bonner's got an iron fucking chin. I don't understand the marketing surrounding that.
Yeah, marketing aside, I think it's going to be an intriguing matchup. If nonetheless, when I first saw it, I was just like, "You got to be freaking kidding me!" I mean, you take Forrest Griffin and James Irvin and mix them together, and you've got Stephan Bonnar. Like if you think about it,
yeah.
So it's just kind of a crazy coincidence, and ultimately I'm looking forward to it. I just can't wait to see Anderson Silva go out there and fight again, considering, we haven't seen very much of him. I mean, he fights twice in 1 year, so it's definitely going to be an honor to see that. And this is the swan song of Stephan Bonnar. If he loses, he's probably going to retire.
Quack,
wins.
quack, quack, quack. Isn't that the swan song?
No, a swan goes like... I don't even know. A swan goes moo.
Oh, what the fuck? This is probably going to be Stephan Bonner's last fight in the UFC, at least the way I see it. He was saying the only reason he was going to come out of retirement, it was actually kind of comical. He said he was only going to fight someone with more Twitter followers than he had. I guess Anderson Silva must have more Twitter followers than Stephan Bonnar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great pod. So it sounds like we don't have anything more to say on the main event, Anderson Silva versus Stephan Bonnar. Anderson Silva is like a minus 100,000 in Vegas. Chris is cooked. So let's get to the news, go over the news for a little bit, and we got a lot to talk about there. Starting off with the major bit of news being that Strikeforce is rumored to be done. Not too surprised this is happening. Their two upcoming cards were Healy versus Melendez. Melendez pulled out like really recently before, like less than 2 weeks, I think. And Showtime actually made the executive call to pull that off the air and cancel the whole event ultimately. And you had Mir versus Cormier. Mir pulled out of the fight. Mitch Rion turned down that title shot in Strikeforce, which things aren't looking bright in Strikeforce. But it's going to be really interesting. The two major things that stand out to me is this means that the Strikeforce champions, Melendez, Marquardt, and Rockhold, will be moved over to the UFC, which they'll make an immediate impact. I think Gilbert Melendez, I don't know if he should get an automatic title shot, especially if Nate Diaz beats Benson Henderson, but it would be awesome to see Melendez fight maybe the winner of Cerrone versus Pettis. Luke Rockhold would be an amazing fit in the UFC middleweight division right now. That's kind of at a standstill. Weidman's just... I feel kind of bad for Weidman, even though I don't think Munoz was that skilled of a fighter, and he dominated him, whatever. But he is definitely the top middleweight contender, and all he has to do now is stand around or fight Bisping, who's, barely top 5. I think Rockhold coming over would be an excellent choice for next opponent for Chris Weidman. And Nate Marquardt, like I said before, how awesome would it be to see Marquardt Ellenberger? Jesus Christ.
Oh, man. Co-signed, bro. That's a fantastic fight we talked about earlier this episode.
Co-signed. Yeah, so those champions coming over would be awesome. And I guess that would mean that the UFC would open up a women's division, or probably two, a 135 and a 145. Or shit, just have a 140-pound division and tell them all to fight each other. But, yeah, the women's division, actually, thanks to Ronda Rousey, who's a goddamn rock star, as Dana White calls her, she's kind of popularized women's MMA. People want to see Rousey fight. People also want to see Cyborg fight. And Rousey Cyborg, I can't think of a better way to ring in women's MMA in the UFC.
Yeah, definitely.
Fucking yeah.
It would just be amazing to finally see that happen, which, a lot of people have been complaining about, or at least talking about, and it should get talked about more. So, it's, if nothing else, no press is bad press, right?
Right. Mayhem Miller storming out of that interview with Ariel Helwani. He was slurring his words. He was drunk. I don't know if he was on drugs. He was definitely drunk.
That's pills. I can.
You think he was on pills?
I can recognize. Dude,
it was so bizarre because Ariel was trying to be calm with him, but he was like, "So, Mayhem, I asked to interview Mayhem Miller. I didn't want to ask to interview Lucky Patrick." Which Mayhem was refusing to get out of character of this guy, Lucky Patrick, who's the guy he plays on Here Comes the Boom. So at first, I was expecting, when I heard Mayhem storms out of the MMA hour and I heard a rough synopsis of it, I was like, okay, he refused to come out of character, and got pissed. He was in character. He was acting like this character from that Here Comes the Boom movie, Lucky Patrick. Irish guy with green hair. But it was a train wreck from start to finish. Slurring his words, yelling, throwing stuff, picking stuff up, throwing it around. I was just like, wow, what the fuck is going on? And what added even more to it, I don't know if any of you saw Ariel Helwani's response to it. I didn't know he and Mayhem went back so far. Actually, when Helwani was applying for a green card, his manager told him that he should get a fighter to write a letter of recommendation for him to prove he's big in the sport. And Mayhem actually wrote that letter of recommendation. Jason Miller is one of my favorite personalities in the sport, and it was really sad to watch it, to be honest.
Not only was it sad, you and me actually watched that, and we couldn't help but go, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What the hell is going on?
Yeah, it was hard to believe someone so well known in the sport is just going off.
Yeah, that was just really uncomfortable as a viewer, for sure. There was no fun to it. It wasn't interesting. No. It was just really, really, really uncomfortable and weird.
Really sad. Sad's the one word. Sad and disturbing, at least for Miller's help, because, after the third or fourth time that Ariel's like, so Lucky Patrick, can I talk to Jason Mayhem Miller? He's like, no, man, Jason's in the woods. He's in the woods. Like, holy fuck. And he was not kidding. He was, he stormed out telling Ariel to fuck off. Actually stole a shirt of his, throwing shit around, being extremely disrespectful. It's been it's been a very public meltdown, cussing out Dana White, cussing out Ronda Rousey, being found naked in a church, I guess, being at the top of the list. And, I guess he's still spiraling downward unfortunately. Honestly, he needs a year to just be surrounded with people that love him, can't be allowed on Twitter, can't be allowed in public, because he was such a public figure on Bully Beatdown, and obviously these losses that he took to Bisping and CB Dollaway and being cut from the UFC really, really affected him.
Yeah, it's just really sad to see it, especially a guy who's very charismatic and at times seems strange, but never this strange. So I think you're right. He needs to reevaluate everything and probably get some professional help, to be honest. Not trying to be a dick, but that was too much, man. He's just burning all of his bridges, and that's never a healthy thing.
Sorry, I was muted there as I was talking over you. Honesty, man. What about Dana White liking the idea of Jones Cormier? Really quick, what do you see happening there?
It'd be a fantastic fight. You got a guy who, he's older. Cormier, we talked about that. He's 34 years old, but he just has the wrestling to neutralize Jones's wrestling. I think he could be the first person to take Jones down, so I think that makes it very intriguing.
Yeah, I think Rashad's wrestling posed a little bit of a problem for John Jones, and Cormier is just like a bulked up Rashad Evans, so I would be really interested to see that fight. I don't really want to go over this topic long, but Ronda Rousey saying breaking an arm is like tearing apart a turkey with your crotch. I'm going to see if Ronda Rousey wants to come over for Thanksgiving, because I would like
Give her a turkey.
I would like no other way before eating my Thanksgiving turkey before, Anyway, I would skip over it because we're toward the end of the episode, but let's do a solid 10 seconds of Sprots just because we missed it last week. You ready? Sprots. UF defeats number 3 LSU. Georgia loses horribly to South Carolina. Both of them now in the top 5. MLB playoffs in full swing. Fuck Gary Bettman for the NHL lockout. Fuck Jerry Sandusky. He's now in jail forever. Shazam. Ectoplasm everywhere. Oh, God.
I feel so dirty.
So dirty. Yeah, what do you think of this BJ Penn, Rory McDonald Twitter quarrel? Rory saying BJ Penn needs to eat more quarter pounders. BJ Penn calling Rory Pimple Boy. Do you put any stock into it, or is it just a couple of brats spouting off at each other?
Just a couple of brats trying to pump up their fight. It's perfectly natural. I like it.
Very true. Yeah, we got one more little bit of news. Guida drops to 145 pounds. It's definitely not as stacked as a division as 155, and Guida was able to keep himself in the mix at 155 pounds. What do you think his chances are at featherweight?
I'd give him definite chances. I mean, he's posed some problems for some top shelf guys before. He lost to Florian by domination, lost to Huerta. But he's beat guys like Danzig, Nate Diaz, who's fighting for a title. So I think a guy who's undersized for a division, kind of like in the same boat as Frankie Edgar, would do really well facing opposition. That's his same height, weight, and frame.
For sure. I guess we've gone over all the news topics. UFC 153 this Saturday night. The pay-per-view is going to start at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific. We usually ask this question after we have a fighter on and refer back to the interview. But, Chris, what did you learn today?
I learned today that, that we can go on some awesome tangents and just completely shoot ourselves in the feet.
Co-signed on that one. I think I learned that I'm very stiff for James Head. I'm so stiff for James Head.
You are, and the cream always rises to the tip.
Cream always rises to James Head. Huge thanks to our listeners. We've actually gotten a lot of positive feedback on our YouTube videos, and I really appreciate that. If you're listening to us right now on YouTube, you can subscribe to us, hit that button, I believe, up and to the left of the actual video screen. Definitely leave a comment. We read all those. Tweet at us. Follow us on Twitter at the MMA Podcast. Obviously, our website is themmapodcast.com. We got the MMA Roundtable every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We air live every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. It's kind of funny. We've gotten over a dozen UFC fighters on, and we've only had like 4 or 5 listeners call in. We love taking calls, hearing your take. So if you want to listen to us live, listen to us Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Follow us on Ustream for that. Our future guests, Nate Corey on in the next couple weeks, Michael Chavello, MMA legend Renzo Gracie, Joey Coco motherfucking Diaz. Woo! And unless you got anything else, we gone.
We gone, man.